Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm Hamish and I work for a company called RealPage, which hopefully knows something about RealPage. We're a large American software company and we do a lot with data and we do a lot with property management and we do a lot with leasing journeys and we do a lot with accountancy. We do a lot with everything software related for the build-to-rent market. So you'll probably see a lot of RealPage around the place. I'm really privileged today to be able to moderate this panel. I've got some great questions and I've got an amazing set of panelists here with me. I think we'll start left to right and we'll go through a just brief introduction so everyone knows who we're talking to and where they're coming from with their thoughts around big data and what we should be doing with it. Sandra.
Okay, so my name is Sandra Jones. I'm Managing Director of DataLoft. We're a housing market economics consultancy. We have a market analytics platform, so subscription-based tech platform. We white label research on behalf of investors, developers, and big consultancies. And we have something we call DataLoft Rental Market Analytics, which is where we face this audience of the build-to-rent market. And it's we have a very large data set of rents achieved and renter demographics. And we use that to help our clients understand market and to provide an evidence base.
Cool. I will speak quietly to start with, because normally I come onto a microphone and it booms the speakers out. My name is Ian Murray. I'm the Senior Director of the Build-to-Rent Consultancy at Cortland Consult. Cortland are a US multifamily owner-operator, 85,000 apartments in the US, about 18 billion deployed capital, currently deploying somewhere between 1 and 4 billion, depending on the day of the week and whether or not we're speaking to Property Week or not. And I am a dealer in data. That's what I do. If you want to know any data, I'm your man. So, I mean, our business is really a data-driven consultancy. We provide a lot of analytics for our clients and our investors, both internally to Cortland and externally to my entire client base, several of whom are here. And, you know, I just probably peddle data on a daily basis. Our team mine data on a daily basis, and we get it from multiple different sources. But ultimately, it's about giving our clients the confidence to place their money and their investments in a certain place and that they're going to make money in the future. That's what it's really about.
And my name is Trent McGill. I work with Global Apartment Advisors. I relocated here in the UK in January to work with GA and other BTR operators. Working within software and infrastructure implementation to assist not only operators but also investors with structuring data and being prepared to ingest that data, analyze that data, and then hopefully integrate into larger platforms to really focus on where they're deploying their capital. So yeah.
Fantastic. What a great group, right? I'm privileged to be up in front here with everybody. So the question that I want to bring to everybody first off, and I see this from a slightly different perspective. I have a strong smart building perspective, and a lot of the data that we were being asked about was about ESG information. And it often surprised me how that people were more interested in the data than they were actually about improving ESG. Like data was so important that they almost forgot about that, hey, we could actually improve the situation. It was just, let's report on it, let's report on it, let's report on it. So data is important to the industry as a whole. Can I just get everyone's sort of thoughts? I think we'll keep going left to right. Sandra, when it comes to your perspective of why data is so important, how does that change your work every day?
Okay, it's specifically ESG?
No, just
okay,
data in general,
any
yeah.
Data, yeah, okay. So that word data-driven that Ian used, we use that to describe our work as well. So every piece of work we do is underpinned by data sets, and those come from multiple sources, and our job is to interpret them and bring them together and find the meaning. So data is not an end in itself, it never is, but it's an absolute essential part of the process. But it's understanding, it's bringing the meaning and the interpretation is where we all add value. And there are so many tools to do that these days, you know, whether that's from spatial analysis through to AI, through to machine learning. And there's so many different techniques we can bring to bear. But it's always about helping our clients to come to their decisions from a sound foundation of hard evidence.
Fantastic.
What she said.
Yeah.
No. I mean, there are different reasons for collecting data in my world. One is principally to help my clients mitigate the risks. So they want to know what the market's doing, what's going to be doing in 12 months' time, how it's going to grow, how rents are going to grow, how many people are available to rent a property, and what age group, and are they going to pay for extra services, and et cetera, et cetera. So, really that data is being used by the investment community to underwrite what they're doing before they make their final investment. So that's the risk element of it. Then there's the compliance part, which is the data for collection that you need to do in order to comply with certain health and safety legislation. ESG is a massive part of that data collection exercise, because we're recording the amount of energy we're using, the amount of emissions we're making, and there are kind of a couple of outcomes from that data. One, the compliance part allows you to report that you're meeting your standards by complying with them. But the second part is, well, what does this data tell us? And that really flows into the third part, which is you're collecting data from an operational perspective. And from an operational perspective, what you're really trying to do is understand how your buildings are being used and how they're performing, and how can we better serve our clients. So, while we might talk about keyless entry systems, a keyless entry system is a collection of data as you go through the building. It tells us where you are and what you've done, and whether you've gone to the gym or whether you've gone to the co-living lounge, etc. And that data allows us to then map it towards the operational side of the business, is saying, so right, well, we've had 150 people through the gym in the last 2 hours, somebody better go and clean it. And that kind of information is extremely important. So the data collection serves multiple purposes, and it's a smorgasbord of data out there, and you just have to decide what recipe you're cooking for what client's eating it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that when it comes to especially smart technology, we are starting to encounter an immense amount of data, and we don't really have a larger data strategy just yet from a lot of different perspectives, and I think that we can probably all agree with us up front. It's one of the things that we would probably drive for first is just a larger data strategy. If you're going to be analyzing it, if you're going to be leveraging it to make it actionable, let's not make it a single thread purpose. Let's make sure that we are taking things and we're making it purposeful and it's useful, and the data that we are taking in is going to be used in the manner that we want to use it. It's going to be valuable for not only our tenants, our investors, our operational purposes, and so there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And I think ESG is just one of those things that are out there. It's a huge topic, and there's a lot of easy things just to throw at it in order to justify data. But again, making sure that it's actionable, making sure that we have a strategy, and we're collecting it in a purposeful way is really, really important.
It kind of leads on to the next question, which is really pointed. What are the benefits of good data? And I'm assuming that means that there's not good data, not only for the operators but for the owners. What are the key benefits of good data?
So there are, yes, there is a huge amount of not good data. It's normally because it's not being kept consistently and rigorously. So it's about being very organised in the way that you collect data, being very consistent, having protocols and rules and definitions. Those are normally the things that make something bad data. If it's been collected well and it's been collected consistently, there's probably no such thing as bad data. Okay. But there might be such a thing as an overload of data. And I think that's probably the more common problem, that sometimes it's just, you can't make sense of it. It's too much data for the sake of data. So it's always, I mean, I think Ian made the point, you should have a purpose to your data. And you might not know that purpose today. It might be, you might be collecting it because you think there's going to be a purpose in a few years, or it will become more valuable when you've got more of it. But just kind of have some idea in your mind of what is the end goal of that data, whether it's valuable this year or next year or the year after. Why are you doing it? But most of all, just being really, really rigorous about how orderly and tidy you are and consistent. And I mean, we work with a lot of clients who hand over their data to us and want us to analyse it and report back, and that's a very common thing. And I don't think we've got Sarah in the room, but a good example is Foxtons. They are so rigorous with their data, and they've done it for 20 years. And I think people don't even get paid if they don't fill in the right boxes, all the way through the organisation. So to have that sort of rigour and discipline. So they're
demanding good data, basically.
Yeah, and they have done for a long time, and so then they do end up with something really valuable. Yeah.
So imagine you've gone to a greengrocer and you're confronted with all the fruit and vegetables, and your client wants you to make a ham sandwich. That's kind of how the data works. Is that, you know, there are so many sources of data. You're so correct in about how it's collected. Age of data makes a big difference. You know, things like census data only gets updated periodically. There are so many data sources that are more live. You know, some of the companies that we work with, like Realize, for instance, are drawing data that's literally hours old out of systems like Rightmove and Zoopla. So you're getting kind of data that's really up to date. And you can basically go into sort of data overload. You could literally consume data in massive quantities. When you're faced with the question of, can I have a ham sandwich out of this? It's really working out, right, hang on a minute. I'm standing in front of all the wrong data, and somehow I need to go and mine the right data. And, you know, that can be a challenge at times. There's times when we get asked questions, we're going, that data just simply doesn't exist. And what the best thing that we can do is look at all of the other available or closest to data, and then try and work out what the solution would be. And you know, that's a challenge of probably all of our businesses on a constant basis. Is that you know, distillation of data down into the correct recipe that answers the question that you've been asked. And you know, the questions that we get asked are so varied and so wide that, you know, even sometimes you ask, why are you even asking me that question? But you know, an investor may be interested in that thing, and that's what they want to know.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time looking at and listening to what the asks are, and in turn, in order to understand the data that we have, we spend a lot of time, or I ask my clients to spend a lot of time understanding processes. So let's look at the processes and what we're doing in order to collect that data. Then we can structure it in a way that we're consuming it and we understand where it is initially. We can change those processes, which will change the data slightly, or make it improve the integrity, or achieve some goals that we're speaking or looking to kind of answer. But much like Sandra said, there's not really bad data. It's not understanding how we got there or what we're doing in order to collect it, because then it just is not really that useful unless we understand those aspects of it.
Really interesting. I'm actually going to jump one of the questions a little bit forward, because I think this is really interesting. And from my job, I get to spend a lot of time. I'm privileged to work with a lot of operators on a daily basis. And one of the things that they're constantly talking to me about is that different investors are wanting different data. And it's a bit of a challenge, because they're running a portfolio, and this property has this investor and they want the data in this way, and vice versa. One of the things that's really interesting for me is that in the States, generally the investors want information on a property level. They're not really interested in units. Whereas here in the UK, there's almost an obsession with unit level data, which is very, very different. I was talking to an operator from the States the other day, an investor from the States the other day. I said, do you really care what's going on at a unit level? He's like, absolutely not. I want to know how my asset's performing, and that's it. So the question is going to be that as more investor capital comes into the build-to-rent market, and it's growing so fast, right? How can operators, and I know it's a little bit different to what you're doing on a daily basis, but how can operators adjust their business processes to give those individual investors the data the way that they want it?
How can they adjust their business processes? I mean, I suppose the answer to that is, I mean, on the unit level data question, from my perspective, unit level data gives you a lot more insight. So, and because we do now have the tools and the capacity to handle unit level data, if we can get it, we'd like to have it. So I think, you know, that shouldn't, the barrier there is people feeling able to share it, or feeling able, or having it at their side of the fence in a way that can be shared easily. And I think probably that's where RealPage comes in, isn't it? That you have tools that enable the customer to be, because for us, you know, one of the real challenges is how do you enable businesses to share data with you? So how do they get their data into an orderly fashion? And I'm doing a panel later on who lives in build to rent, and we go through that process with the BPF in UK, and we have a sample. We have a lot of data coming in from different BTR providers on the demographics in their portfolio, and it is it 3 years now, and there's a huge willingness amongst those contributors to share the data with us, and they want to be part of that process and part of that collaboration. But it's shockingly hard for a lot of them to access their own data, and that's because it's often being held by third parties, maybe a management software or a tenant referencing company, or it's somewhere, or it's separate, sort of disparate in their organisation, or from outside organisations. And I think there's a huge conversation to be had about, you know, who owns that data and who is entitled to access it, and, you know, and how do you streamline that process when you've got the will from the provider? How do you streamline it so that they can actually act on that? And take away the friction, take away the barriers to them actually being able to hand that data so that we can use it effectively.
Not to make it a real page advert,
I love you, Ed.
but I mean, sucking that data in from all of the different sources and then bringing it into a centralized platform that you can then press an automated button and go, I've got my investor report to generate. That data goes out and gives that report. I've got my internal operational report to generate. That data goes and it gives the operational team that information. I've got my supplier to have an argument with. I want the supplier information. So, I mean, the nirvana in the future is that all that data flows into, you know, probably the proprietary system that you've chosen, maybe RealPage. Other proprietary systems are available. But, you know, so that you can then automate the process of bringing out the data and reporting in. And you will have different clients will ask you different questions. And again, it's automating that reporting, you know, based on what their criteria is. The part that becomes most difficult is that you have to then go to the Foxtons example, and you have to make sure that the data is being fed in the first place in the proper way. So that's all about training your teams and training your people about inputting data that is absolutely recordable. I mean, if we were to take it in the context of, say, like a health and safety, so I mean, the health and safety executive brought out a reportable accidents legislation a number of years ago, and the basis of that was that you reported you had an accident so that you could gather statistics and understand what accidents were happening in the construction industry, for instance, or on site. And then action changed so that the change could then be influenced by why accidents were being caused in the first place. Now, we have to kind of think like that for the operational data that flows towards us. It's like, I mean, I'm just not going to be gathering data for no reason. I have to have a purpose for that data. And the purpose has to be that it's going to improve my operational capability, my operations, but the resident experience is going to be uplifted as a part of it. And if the resident experience and my operations are not both being mutually benefited by that data, why am I collecting it in the first place? You know, so I need to streamline that and get rid of some of the data. So I mean, there's so far down the track to go, and I will finish in 1 minute. And the US market is so much more mature than our market, which means that their data gathering is much more automated and much more streamlined. And we are in this nascent industry called BTR in the UK, which is still travelling down that path and learning its feet and learning how to collect data. And not everybody's sharing it because not everybody wants to be outside of a competitive environment at the moment. So, you know, the nirvana is that we all reach that goal, and I hope we get there soon.
Yeah, you answered that exactly right. Took my answer. But yes, BTR is still learning. So there is a strong desire to take everything down as far as a unit level. There's still a lot to be learned. There's still a lot to be understood about our market, where we're going, the lessons that we still need to learn, and what are valuable specific to UK investors and all of the operators alike. So it's really important to continue doing that and making sure that we can report on multiple levels. That nirvana we will eventually get to, but can we go ahead and provide that report operationally? And more importantly, can our operating partners understand what that data is? So when we start talking about those investor reports, what is the impact of operation and staff and their responsibility to contribute to that data to ensure that reporting is sufficient and effective to the end goal of the partner, both inside and outside?
Can I just ask you? I mean, you're more coal-faced from the US to the UK than the rest of us, and while I'm owned by a US company. I'm not coalface in the UK. My understanding is from my US colleagues that there is a much greater kind of flow of data into the centralized systems and sources that gives a much quicker transparency to what kind of outcomes. Is that your experience?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a greater kind of landscape of technology and kind of looser regulations around data. So how can we aggregate that data, and how can we actually leverage that data is not as heavily regulated.
But looser regulation around sharing it, but really tight regulation or rules around how it's recorded. So,
Correct.
yeah. So you
absolutely.
actually, I think, is the NAA actually have set the definitions, set the standards for what data, what each component means, and we need that here. We kind of need that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's definitely that standardization, and from an industry perspective. So when we talk about things like tenancy agreements or applications, there's actually forms that you can be in one state and go across the entire country and still have a very similar agreement with just a few changes in there. And so being able to collect that data, share that data, and really report across it very, very easily is definitely easier.
It sort of feels like that. Can I speak? Sorry for your question.
No,
Sorry.
it's great.
Feels like the Holy Grail, because I mean, I first got involved in this industry, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and I remember some, really powerful, forthright Americans coming over, and this is how we do it in America, and this huge will and positivity around data sharing, and it felt really exciting. So we thought, right, it's kind of day one here, and we're going to start that way, and we're going to build this amazing resource, centralized resource, and nobody minds that it's all in a central place, because it's what you interpret from it and how you use it, how you act on it, that's going to matter, not the fact that all that data is in a central place. And it feels like we're now at a moment when we really need to have that transparency, and we kind of need to come together and agree that there will be some sort of central repository and central place with the single source of truth for this market. And it's almost disappointing when you think back to those Americans, kind of pioneers coming over and being really open and willing to share, and then the market hasn't allowed that to happen, or the culture over here hasn't allowed that to happen. So I feel like we should kind of unlock that and
I'm going to slightly come back on that, given I have a very large American owner. But, I mean, it's to do with the maturity of the market, I think. There is a point in every market where at the forefront of it, and I think I've been doing BTR, PRS, whatever else we're calling it.
Sometime.
Yeah, 9 years or something like that. And you're in a competitive environment where you're still competing for sites, still competing for new development, still competing for clients, still competing for money, residents, the whole thing. So the maturity of the market hasn't gone anywhere close to the American market yet. I mean, it's 0.98% of the total rental market is BTR, pure BTR, not PRS. So we're still a long way away from that, and I think the NA and the UKA are making good grounds, and the bit that we did about the open and operating report and the rental reports is to do with sharing data into that. So we do recognise that needs to start. But there's probably a bit more maturity in the market for me needs to come before we'll really see everybody opening up their biscuit tin,
Yeah, so not opening up completely, but I think just start as we mean to go on. So let's start with the bits that are not commercially sensitive. So maybe that's an open source register of all BTR schemes. And like everybody wants everyone to know about their scheme. So just if every provider, operator, whatever, just put their version of the truth into a central place that said, right, this is the address, this is the number of units, this is the date built, this is just those broad facts, and then we'd have a single source of truth on the stock in the market. That would be a starting place, and then other bits of private data could hang off that. And I understand that has to be secure and controlled access and permissioned, but a starting point.
We will release the map data in about 2 days' time, and it does almost exactly that.
No, I know, and of course the BPF have the Savills data set, but the problem is those haven't been contributed from the owners. So it's everybody. We've got our own version of the list, but we've all had to scrabble around and find it from different sources. So I just feel like if we could just say everybody put their own version of the truth about their building into the central place, rather than, because whoever does it, there's always going to be this doubt. Well, have they checked it recently? Did they get it right? So it needs to come from the horse's mouth, really.
Yeah, and I mean, well, you know, what's the definition of BTR? Is a 60-unit project a definition of a BTR?
So then you need definitions.
You know, so
or grades.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, but then we can classify them, can't we?
My question, and this isn't one of the questions, but why? Like, what's the outcome? What's the benefit of this data to a resident or an operator or an investor? Like, why should we care?
Well, as an operator,
well,
or
as
anybody,
potential resident, yeah. Why do you care about this call?
Okay, because the further we can go to understanding this market and what the preferences are and what drives rent and what drives the next development, the more we can understand that, the better, I suppose, product market fit. We'll end up building the right thing, at the right time, in the right place, at the right price, and we'll put the right amenities in. It's just transparency.
So again, I'm going to banner one of our friends, which is Home Views. I mean, I think the Home Views ratings are, a great, collection of a single source of data that is actually mined from real residents, giving real survey results. And we spend a lot of time as a business analysing that data inside the system and outside the system because it informs our future thinking. So, if you're to answer your question, why we need that data, because if we're going to make this market better, then we need to understand what made it bad or what didn't work and why it needs to work differently. I mean, to the point about why do we map the market? If you're sitting in Chicago on top of a pension fund with 4 billion or 40 billion to deploy, and you're researching around the world, and there's a single source of data that you can plug into in the UK, and it says the market's this size, and by the way, it could be this size. All we need is several billion of your pension fund data. Then there's a very good reason for that pension fund to come across and invest. So, I mean, I think from our point of view, collectively between, and this is a kind of a UKAA forum to do that, is if we can outwardly look like a place where money should be deployed because it's deployed well, it performs well, it gives the right returns, and by the way, there's a growing market of very happy people who are saying that in Home Views it's good and they like it more than they like the PRS market, then all of a sudden we'll see the capital flow towards us. And in an economic cycle right now where the capital has stopped flowing, let's not beat around the bush, all this stuff about it slowing down, Q3 deals and Q4 deals, any deal that was on the table was done in Q3, anything that was going to be done in Q3 isn't getting done in Q4 or Q1. So we still need to continue to make ourselves attractive to the external world because the limited amount of capital flow you want to flow towards you. And if you don't do that, it will go to Spain, it will go to Copenhagen, it will go to Holland, and that's the reason for making the data compelling and outward facing.
And it's not only investment money, although I agree that's absolutely critical, but it's also policymakers, because we have a mayor of London who's contemplating rent controls, and because they don't have the full picture. So actually, there are many reasons. Central government needs to understand whether it should continue shrinking the private rental sector, or all those things, and actually, but more to the point, the extent to which it should be supporting this sector to come and fill the gaps. So,
and I'll just touch on the tenant perspective. We talked earlier in one of the earlier sessions about what the future looks like for brands, and having confidence in that data. And having a resource for people to understand and know that it's truthful, it's accurate, it's up to date. They have faith to go to the operators and go to those individual websites and know what they're getting, when they're getting, and how they're getting it. It's really important for our future.
It's a big difference from where we are today, and I couldn't agree more, by the way, especially on the need for policymakers to understand how important what we all collectively do is for the UK. In so many ways, the solution to housing is not to bring up rent controls, it's to deliver more housing, especially institutionally owned and managed and professional, great places to live.
Well, the slightly scary thing about a mayoral decision to put rent controls in place, which affects 0.1% or 1% of the market, which is the professionally managed BTR massively, which is trying to change the PRS market, which is the 99% of the market that we need to change, is not going to be helpful.
He just needs to have the facts. When Sadiq first came in as mayor, one of his driving questions was, is it fact or myth that that half of London's properties are left empty by overseas owners? He just, I don't want to hear any more opinion. I want some facts. And he commissioned a piece of research. It was a big piece of research laid down as a baseline to say, right, I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm not asking for, the rumours. I'm asking for just show me some facts that say, is this or is this not reality? And I think we need to do the same thing with what's going on in the rental market. So for him to be able to make an informed decision, because he gets a lot of lobbying from, Generation Rent and Shelter and sorry.
No, go for it.
No, well, again, I think that's interesting because, you've heard several times today about double-digit rent growth in the market, and there is double-digit rent growth in the market. The 99% PRS market, the market that's not professionally managed and institutionally backed. If you go to, and I've referred to this more than once recently, Dan Batterton spoke at the Urban Living Festival about double-digit rent growth and L&G making a very moral and conscious decision to only grow rents by a much smaller amount because it was the right thing to do. Now, across the board, I know Cortland are doing that. I bet you Get Living and Granger and everybody else are making similar decisions. They're not double-digit rent growing. It's got to be understood by the mayor, where that rent growth is being driven from, and it's rogue landlords and profiteering landlords driving them up so hard because the rental supply is limited.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree that rogue landlords drive the market. I think there are undoubtedly rogue landlords.
Let's not call them rogue landlords.
Yeah.
I mean, what I mean is the 99%. Non-professionalised market.
But even those, if you look at the evidence from the non-corporate rental market, certainly when tenants stay year after year, most landlords don't go back to full market rent every year. If a lease is renewed, they often let it stay at a historic rent. So.
I get that.
Yeah, I just think it's just we don't have all the facts, and actually there are a lot of responsible landlords on both sides of the divide. Maybe it isn't a divide, actually. We're all one ecosystem.
You had 10 minutes, 5 minutes ago.
Oh, really? Okay, fair enough too. So from an operator perspective, and largely that's what the show is about today, quite often the tech stack that you'll be running the operations with will have different subsystems. There'll be cherry-picked elements of, we use this for leasing because we really like it, or we use this accounting system. It's not necessarily a complete package from one vendor. And you can get a whole load of reports in different fashions. Some may have APIs, some may be Excel spreadsheets, some may be on the back of a carrier pigeon as written on here. You've got all of this data in all of these different places. What strategies would you use to bring that data together? Is there anything from...
I'm going to tell you to look that way.
I should look this way. Okay, I'll pivot. Trent, you can start this time. What strategies would you put in place?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Depends how much money you have. Yeah, that's the biggest kind of impact to that decision. You cherry pick for a variety of reasons, and so when you choose to cherry pick, and you want to bring all of that data together, whether an integration or a reporting platform, it's going to come down to how deep your pockets are. So you're either going to keep some of those things separate and report from them from a departmentalized kind of scenario, or you're going to, another method would be bringing components or certain components that can be measurable against some of the other data that makes sense from a reporting perspective. And then, the holy grail is obviously building the infrastructure to bring it together internally and storing that data in an effective manner so you can report from a data warehouse or BI perspective, depending on what you're trying to achieve.
And stateside, sorry, just Trent, in the States, did you see that very differently to what you're seeing over here?
Well, I think that we're still pretty early here, so I don't think that there are probably a couple of big operators that have invested in data warehouses or data lakes, depending on what they're doing. But we're still moving in that direction currently.
Right. If you want to miss the next session, I'll try and keep this short.
Just welcome.
I mean, again, back to the maturity of a market. So what we are is we're in a market where 30 vendors are out there fighting for market share, and there are new technologies that are competing against each other, And those platforms are saying, I'm the best, no, I'm the best, no, I'm the best. Now, they will shake out. There will be consolidation in the market. There will be those that rise to the top because they are better, and there will be those that fail because either they're not funded properly or they're not providing the right kind of technology. So, and that market will just continue to grow like that for a while until some consolidation comes into the market, which is probably a few years away yet. However, on the platform side, and again, we share a bit of knowledge in this regard. I mean, you have management platforms, you have aggregating platforms, and you have technologies. And right now, for me, a lot of the focus is on the aggregating platforms, bringing lots of different information and technologies into what you would call a single pane of glass. And that single pane of glass is where your management team get their information from and are able to look into all the other different systems. And that, for me, is a very key part of the whole evolution of the software platform market. Now, I think the core services of asset management, facilities management, leasing, rent collections, there are certain core things from an operational perspective that you just need. Then, it goes into the kind of FM side of things where you need to look into lots of different platforms. So there's a lot of stuff happening out there that we just haven't got full control over. We shouldn't think that we've got full control over it, because why should we not competitively let companies just develop their products and let them work it out? And, we will see some good things come forward that will last, and we'll see some good things fail because they're not going to, be well enough funded. So it's exciting. It would be great if it all accelerated much quicker and became much simpler, but it's not likely to happen like that.
Fantastic. Well, I believe we're out of time. Is that correct?
I think you had 5 minutes, but we're probably down to 2 now.
Down to 2. So we'll go for closing remarks. Anything that you'd like to share with the group from today's discussion that you think is poignant?
I mean, I guess for me, it's just that I feel like I'm quite sort of on a mission about getting this data sharing. So, getting the keepers of that data to feel comfortable that it can be put in a central place for the good of the industry and actually for your own personal good, or for your business good, and it will be secure, it will be safe, it will be used responsibly, and I'd just like to see some movement on that.
And for the good of society, right?
And society,
amazing.
Yeah.
Trent?
The planet.
I think it's an exciting time right now to be in the market. I think that the growth that I've seen in just the last year, the agility to react to the market conditions that are out there have been quite remarkable. And it's exciting to see how people continue to mold the industry and carry it forward, especially what we learn from a data perspective and how we can leverage that for future decisions.
And Ian, the last voice in the room.
I mean, I love this market, and I love the fact that we're all in different bits of it and we're all sharing. And, I love events like this where we're all coming together to learn stuff from each other that, we can then take back to our businesses and apply to it. And, I think data is such a, it's an easy term to throw out, but actually understanding how it's used and how it's how it's managed and how it's then regurgitated for answering questions. I think ultimately you just have to understand what are you actually trying to get from your data question? What do you want to know that is going to benefit what you're doing, either from a risk or from a compliance or from an ESG perspective or from an operational perspective? And how are our residents going to, ultimately score higher, results in home views because they're enjoying the experience? And it's our job to make sure that data drives that outcome.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate you being here with us.